announcements this evening?
Reminder, there is no school this week. Curious about Rowdy the Ram, about what Rowdy the Ram does over break? Rowdy loves the Springfield community and is making the most of his time off by visiting some of his favorite small businesses in preparation for the smallest big shopping weekend of the year. The Shop Small movement is about supporting small businesses. Every time you pick up a coffee at your local cafe, grab a lunch at the mom and pop shop, or buy a new bag from a local store, you're making an impact on your community. Visit Springfield's social media sites to follow Rowdy as you shop small this week.
Thank you. Public to be heard on agenda items only. Okay, we have one presentation this evening, Dr. Murray with Dr. Nugent and Dr. Weinbach. Going to talk about our overview of the 2018-19 school district, Springfield School District assessment data.
Tonight, I'm happy to share with you the annual data presentation, which reflects the 2018-2019 assessments. We're going to begin by reviewing our elementary data, which reflects PSSA data from grade 3 to 8. We'll be starting looking at our math and English, language arts, and science. As you're probably aware, the PSSAs are given in grades 3 to 8 for math and English, language arts, and grades 4 and 8 for science. This is the dashboard from eMetrics, which really compares and represents the state performance by grade for English language arts. And for each grade, you can see the district and the state data reflected, highlighted in gray. You'll see the district data. And what this represents is the percentage of students that are proficient, advanced, basic, and below basic on the English language arts by grade. You'll see the grade listed on the left column over here. And the numbers in the center represent the percentage of students in each of those categories. What we'll see here in this trend is that it's quite impressive. What we're seeing is that all grade levels are significantly above the state percentage
of students who are proficient or advanced. But what we are also seeing is, if I can direct your attention to the light blue over here, our percentage of students who are advanced. What's quite impressive is the percentage of students who are advanced in most cases are exceeding both the basic and below basic combined, which is truly an impressive number when we're looking at the achievement of our students. So not only are our students achieving and scoring proficient on these assessments, but they are really doing very well. They're really exceeding the benchmark. When we look at our mathematics, we see the same trend as well. In most cases, you'll see that number of, or the percentage of students who are advanced in this case, either exceed or are very close to the percentage of students who are basic and below basic combined as well. And in all cases, we're also exceeding the state averages as well. In reviewing this data represents both ELA and math 5-year cohort data. So if you look at, on the left side, you'll see grade 3 starting in 2015, and that moves all the way up to grade 7 in 2019. In reviewing previous presentations, one of the areas that I've heard that's important to the board is understanding how the cohort data looks. So that's what this slide represents. When we look at PSSA data, many times we compare the percentages within the grade level, which can help us identify curricular needs, however, sometimes is limited in scope because you're not looking at the same group of students. In this slide, when we compare our cohort data, we can see our math and English language arts across 5 years. This graph shows us how students have started in 3rd grade in 2015 and how they're progressing into in 7th grade in 2019. And we see this overall trend of growth for both ELA and mathematics. This slide represents our science achievement, which also is extremely high. You can see the district data is represented in gray for both 4th grade and 8th grade. Those are the only 2 years that science is taken for PSSAs. And again, once again, if I can draw your attention to the percentage of students who are scoring advanced on that PSSA is quite impressive, with 59% of our students scoring advanced for a total of 93.3% in 4th grade science, which is really tremendous. That number across the state tends to drop off a bit for 8th grade, but what you'll see here is we continue to maintain that high level of achievement for 8th grade, with 85% of our students scoring proficient or advanced, and 49% of those students scoring advanced, which again is quite impressive when you look at those numbers. At this time, I'm going to dive into each of the school-specific data. The Future Ready Index is the newest accountability measure for the Department of Education. There are multiple measures associated with the Future Ready Index, including state assessment measures, on-track measures, and college and career measures. Within these 3 categories are several data points. Within the PA Future Ready Index, this was launched in 2018, so this is relatively new for us, but is not the first time we're seeing it. The purpose of the Future Ready Index was to move away from a single summative score to reflect student performance and how schools were doing. As a result, the Future Ready Index reports on these 3 main categories, and you can see that there are a host of other data points that are also shared within the PA Future Ready Index. For the purpose of this presentation, we can't possibly dig into all of these data points because I would fear we might be here till tomorrow if I were to do that. But all of this information is available on the Future Ready PA Index, and you can dive deeper into that data as well. But we'll be doing a comprehensive review of this, just not getting into every single data point. The Future Ready PA Index reports on the several measures I mentioned in the previous slide. When a school meets or exceeds a goal that's been set by the state for a 2030 state goal, you'll see the category represented in blue. So there's 2 ways that the data is presented. First is represented by colors, where you'll see blue represents that the data has met or exceeds the statewide goal. And again, this is a goal that's been developed and set for the state to meet in 2030. The green represents an interim goal. The state has recognized that the goal that has been set for 2030 is quite a lofty goal, and so they've set benchmark interim goals along the way that districts can also show progress towards meeting those goals. So you'll see that represented in green here. When you see red, that is showing that you're not meeting either the statewide goal or the interim goal that's been developed. In addition to the colors, you'll also see an arrow up, which indicates that the data represents an increase from the previous year. A circle represents a relatively maintained achievement from the previous year. And an arrow down represents a decrease in performance. So you'll see a combination of both the colors and the arrows on the next few slides. Presented here is the dashboard for Brooke Elementary. In the left-hand column, the top measure reflects the state assessment measures, and this represents the percent proficient advanced on the English language arts assessment. You'll look at this top measure right up here. As you can see here, not only has Brooke exceeded the statewide target, but they've also increased from the previous year. The second measure in this category represents the English language arts, and in this example for Brooke Elementary, you can see that they have met the statewide target, but they relatively maintained their achievement from the previous year. The third represents mathematics proficiency, and in this instance, you'll see that we have not yet met the statewide target, but we are showing green, which indicates that we have met the interim target that the state has set, and it also indicates that we have improved from the previous year. And the final measure in this category is the growth measure for math, which is also blue and indicates that we've met that statewide goal. On the right-hand side, you'll see the on-track measures, which represents English language growth and attainment. And in this example, Brooke is going to be the only elementary school that will have this particular category. And then the final representation here is your regular attendance, which again is represented in blue, showing that we've exceeded the statewide target for that. This slide represents Brooke Elementary School PSSA scores by grade, and subject. The top two lines you'll see represented third grade and fourth grade ELA scores. And on the column on the right-hand side, you'll see the state comparison, and it'll indicate that we exceed the state comparison here. So this is a combination of students who are proficient and advanced. The next columns you'll see math proficiency for grades 3 and 4, again reflecting that we are well above the statewide comparison as well. And the final row represents the science scores for Brooke Elementary. We're also proud to share that Brooke Elementary is ranked 3rd out of 77 schools in Montgomery County for 4th grade ELA, and we are ranked 11th out of 88 schools from Montgomery County in science. So in comparison to the county, we're doing quite well. This score digs a little bit deeper into the data and looks at the 5-year trend of 3rd grade data. Something that's important to note about this data is that we're not looking at the same cohort of students every year. So this is 3rd grade across several years, but they are different groups of students. This information is helpful because it helps to identify, and we take a look at this and say, is our curriculum where it needs to be? Is there anything that's jumping out, any major areas that we need to really focus on? And what you will see is that there are some dips in data, and there always will be dips in data. But what we do as a building is work to dig through that data and see what story that's telling us, and what can we make, what changes can we make, and what improvements can we make. This slide represents the same as the previous slide, but this is 4th grade data instead of 3rd grade data. And what you'll see here is on the left-hand side, you have ELA in the darker blue, then you'll see math in the center column, and you'll see science in the right-hand column. So this is our 4th grade data, and if I can draw your attention, overall we're seeing an upward trend throughout the several years. But again, keep in mind that this is 4th grade data throughout several years, so you are looking at different cohorts of students. But what this is telling us overall, when you see this upward trend of data or consistent data, is that for the most part your curriculum is in place, it's solid, it's working. Do you need to make some tweaks? Absolutely. You need to adjust and move with your students and identify what your students' needs are, but overall it's showing a tremendous strength in 4th grade. This slide specifically targets cohort data from grade 3 to 4 at Brooke Elementary, and these are only students who were with us for both years of testing. And so what you'll see on the left-hand side, the darker blue represents ELA, and the second column, the lighter blue, represents math. And what you can see is overall, when students are with us for 2 years, we've seen tremendous growth, moving our ELA from 76.3% to 88.8%. Moving our math from 60% to 70%. So again, this is following that cohort of data. Going back to the PA Future Ready Index, this is a snapshot of when you start to dig deeper into that initial dashboard to see what pieces all contribute to those initial circles. This is taken directly from the Future Ready Index, and it represents a proficient advanced on the PSSAs in comparison to the state average. So when you look at this, the column on the left represents English language arts, the one in the center represents math, and the one on the right represents science. Our scores across the building for Brooke is identified on the top column, or I'm sorry, on the top row. The middle represents the state average, and as you can see, we are far exceeding the state average. And the bottom row represents the statewide 2030 goal. As I mentioned previously, if we hit that 2030 goal, then it'll appear as blue. If we've not yet hit that, but we've hit the interim goal, you'll see that pictured as red. And I'm happy to present that you will see all blues and greens as we go along this presentation.
Dr. Murray, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So just to clarify, this is the entire building, right? So regardless of...
Correct.
This is 3rd and 4th together, okay. I'm just trying to tie numbers back to previous slides.
Absolutely. And
Thank
what's
you.
nice is on the platform, you can then dig deeper into there and you can see all the metrics. And what our buildings have been doing is going through and doing that. You can't possibly focus on every data point all the time because you'll never get to actually do anything. But what we do is we look and see what's jumping out to us. What are the needs? What is this data telling us? And then those are the areas that you dig deeper into. And then you can also disaggregate it and look at your demographic data and see what that's really telling you. Something else that our teachers have been working on doing is triangulating that with our NWA MAP data, which was new for us last year. So being able to see, does the story of PSSA tell the same story of our MAP data? And what is this telling us about our student needs? So our principals have been working very hard with our data teams within each building and our curriculum supervisors to really break that down. And again, each building is going to focus on something different based on their need and their data. We'll now shift over to Evans Elementary School. Again, we'll go back to the initial data dashboard. This shows you your overall, starting on the top, English Language Arts, your growth in English Language Arts, your math, and your growth in math, and then your on-track measures on the right side. I mentioned before, Brooke Elementary is the only one who has this top target, so you'll see this appearing blank for all the schools moving on. With all of the elementary schools, you'll see the exact same slides presenting the data, so I'm not going to read every data point to you, but I'm going to try and focus on some of the highlights. In this again represents your English Language Arts for grades 3 and 4, math for 3 and 4, and science. And what's interesting too is again just seeing how far above the state average Evans Elementary is performing, which is quite impressive. A point to celebrate for Evans Elementary is that they are ranked 15 out of 80 in Montgomery County for 3rd grade ELA, ranked 20 out of 77 for 4th grade ELA, and 13th out of 88 in Montgomery County for science. Again, this score represents our 3rd grade trends. This is 2015 to 2019, so you're looking at your 3rd grade each year, not cohort data. So what this is really telling us is that we are seeing this overall trend of growth, some peaks, some dips, but overall trend of growth, which is showing us that there's consistency in our curriculum and some pretty steady improvement that's going across the years. If you look at our ELA data that starts in 2015, where we're starting at 75.4% proficient and moving 5 years later to 86 at Evans is quite substantial. This represents your 4th grade trends in Evans Elementary. And again, not only are we seeing high performance, but we're also seeing growth and an upward trend throughout the building. For Evans Elementary, we're seeing our cohort data is also showing high signs of maintaining that high proficiency with math, but growing significantly also with English Language Arts. But please keep in mind that although that we see that the data is maintained and may not see as much of a peak, and in this instance we are seeing a slight decrease in our data, it doesn't mean that our students are not growing. Keeping in mind that this is cohort data, so they're moving to a more complex test the next year, we're still moving our students and still growing our students, and they're making that year's worth of growth. So even though we might see a slight dip in a graph such as this is still representing that our students are still moving an entire grade level and still maintaining that high level of proficiency. When we look in comparison to the state average, again, we are seeing that our English Language Arts and our biology are exceeding that 2030 target already, and that they are very closely approaching the 2030 target for math and are only off by 0.5 percentage point to meeting that. Moving to Limerick Elementary, once again, you'll see the dashboard here. You'll see all of our contents, either blue or green in this instant as well. In this slide, you'll see the comparison, again, for ELA, math, and science for grades 3 and 4, and you'll see, again, the comparison to the state as well, which we are doing very well in Limerick as well. We are happy to share that we're ranked 21st out of 77 in Montgomery County for 4th grade ELA and ranked 8th out of 88 for science. Overall, looking at our 3rd grade trends, we're seeing consistency with our 3rd grade population. We're seeing consistency within our test scores, a few peaks, but overall we are seeing this trend here. There was a significant growth from last year's data when you're looking at your 3rd grade from 2018, moving up to 71.4%, which is quite a significant and impressive growth there. In this slide, we're looking again at our 4th grade trends, and I'd like to draw your attention to the math data from 2018 to 2019. This data, I think, can be deceiving. This graph is representing a decrease from fourth grade proficiency in mathematics, but we need to remember that they're looking at the students in 2018 in fourth grade and in 2019. So they're not the same students testing, but this is definitely one of the examples where we do see a decrease in data, and we're going to dig deeper into that. What is this data telling us? Why did that happen? And start to really do a root cause analysis of what's going on there. When digging into that data, we're going to track the students to see how each student performs, and then also look at, again, at that NWEA map. Is that telling us the same story and really helping us to identify what's going on there? I would also like to draw your attention to the cohort data in third grade in 2018, which grew from a proficiency of 58.7 to 69.9 proficient in advanced, which is a significant increase as well. This slide, once again, represents our cohort data. So what's interesting is that although we see some drops, when you look at our cohort data, again, these are only the students that have been with us for both years, we see some significant gains for those students. So we are looking at, when we're looking at this data, it's telling us that when our students are with us, our students are growing. And we're doing a really great job with that. When we look at the data dashboard, digging into the comparison to the state average, you'll see Limerick Elementary is either green or blue in all of our categories. You'll see we are very close to closing the gap between our statewide goal and where we are currently scoring for both math and ELA, but we have met the interim targets for both of those examples. I'd also like to draw your attention to the science, which is an exceptional number. 94.5%, so I'd be remiss if we didn't celebrate that with Limerick Elementary, that 94.5% of our students are scoring proficient and advanced on that science PSSA, which is amazing. Moving into Oaks, once again, you'll see many examples of growth, and you'll see many examples of us already hitting the target, but we are seeing an area, one of our first areas that we really need to focus in and target. And identify what's going on here. We have met as a team with the building principal, we are disaggregating that, and we're getting down to the student level and really trying to identify what our needs are here. When we do look at the comparison, though, what's interesting, even though we do have that one area where we didn't meet the target for growth, when we look at the state comparison, at Oaks, we are doing exceptionally well. So while we know and recognize that there's some areas that we need to focus on and look at the growth targets, we also take the time to celebrate the areas we're doing well, but we certainly won't forget those areas that we need to target. We are ranked 13th out of 80th in Montgomery County for third grade in ELA, 12th out of 77th for fourth grade ELA, and 26th out of 88 in Montgomery for science. When we look at our third grade trends, once again, it tells a very similar story to our other elementary schools, that when you look at our 5-year trend, we're seeing high, consistent achievement for students, and we're seeing kind of that being maintained, and also an upward trend here for Oaks for third grade. Same for fourth grade at Oaks. We are seeing, if I can draw your attention to where we started in 2015 and look at the growth that we've made over time, that actually may be one of the explanations that we have for why we're not necessarily meeting that growth. Because when you grow rapidly like this, sometimes it's hard to keep hitting that growth target time after time. So while I can't say that that is the answer, that is certainly a contributing factor when you look at your growth over time. This is where we saw that red on the initial slide, where we saw the downward trend here as far as third to fourth grade math. So this is certainly an area that we're focusing in on to see why this occurred. But if I could go back to this slide for a second too, I think again that helps us tell the story as well. But you will see the continual growth with ELA with this particular cohort as well. When we look at our dashboard, we are seeing, though, even though we have some areas where our students aren't, where we need to focus on as far as our growth targets, Oaks is hitting the statewide goal in all 3 categories. So once again, when you're high achieving and you're doing well, it's hard to sometimes maintain that. And that's what we see here, that this is certainly a lot to celebrate. Do we have an area we want to focus on and peel back that onion a little bit? Absolutely. But this is something to celebrate, that in all of our areas, we are meeting or exceeding the 2030 goal. Moving to Royersford Elementary, again, you will see that we are green and blue for both our achievement and our growth targets, as well as our attendance. And once again, this looks very similar to some of our other elementary schools in that we are exceeding the state comparison quite nicely. When we look at our third grade trends, again, we're seeing an overall increasing trend and increasing growth. So our curriculum is maintaining and staying consistent. We are seeing a couple of dips, and it looks like we've also responded to a few of those dips in the past. So overall, we're seeing really nice data here as well for Royersford. When we look at the fourth grade data, this is another one that I really like to look at and just say, wow, there's some amazing things going on. When we look at 2015 and looking at where we've gone for fourth grade over the last several years, this is really showing a lot of hard work on the teacher's part, a lot of hard work on the student's part, and a lot of positives with our fourth grade at Royersford Elementary. When we look at the cohort data, again, these are students that were with us both in third and fourth grade. We are seeing a really nice growth here for ELA. Not as much of a growth, but again, this is showing that students are maintaining that achievement, which is what we want to see. It's not that they didn't grow, it's a harder test. It's the next year. So that's showing that they are maintaining their same level of proficiency. When we look at this dashboard, we're seeing again that our math and English language arts, while it's not quite at the 2030 target, we are very quickly approaching, and in some instances, we are definitely closing that gap, and that we are exceeding the target by 0.8% this year for Royersford Elementary, so we're certainly celebrating that. Moving to Spring City, again, you will see mostly greens and blues in this, but this is again where we're seeing one of our areas that we need to target, and this is once again our growth target. So it's saying that looking at how we're improving with our student growth in English language arts at Spring City. Even though we do have that one area that we need to focus and target, we are seeing still that Spring City is doing a nice job in comparison to the state, so we're proud of that. And once again, when we look at our third grade trends, looking at this 2015, where math, we were looking at about 50% proficiency, moving all the way up to 87.9% proficiency in math. That is tremendous growth over a short period of time. So really a lot to celebrate in regards to this. And again, we're seeing that we see a little bit more peaks and valleys with English language arts, but we're still seeing this overall trend of growth. But certainly this math is just truly something that we need to celebrate. Again, when we look at fourth grade, it's telling a very similar story. So you're seeing an overall trend of growth, and we're seeing across all of our elementaries, our science scores have consistently remained high throughout the years. And this is where we saw the red in the initial slide for Spring City. So we are looking to look at this cohort. I do want to draw your attention to this, though, specifically with Spring City. We're looking at a very small number of students. This particular cohort is 20 students. So in this regard, while we're not accepting any student not achieving, we are looking at this. This does look drastic, but it's still a small percentage of students that we are analyzing, seeing why this happened, why we didn't see the growth from third to fourth grade. But in this instance, truly one student could make the difference. It could have been one student that was on the bubble and just went the wrong direction on that proficiency. So while this, I think, is one of the most dramatic slides in the presentation, I don't necessarily think that it is as dramatic as it might appear, but nonetheless, something that we are looking at and, again, doing a comparison with our MAP data to see, is it telling us the same story? Do we need to make some changes? When we look at this dashboard, again, we're doing exceptionally well. You see your English language arts is approaching the 2030 target, but we have met the interim target, and we have exceeded the statewide target for both math and science for Spring City. And finally, Upper Providence. We are seeing blues and greens for Upper Providence as well. In comparison to our state, on the right side, we are doing tremendously well compared to our state counterparts. And once again, we are seeing tremendous growth for third grade. If I can draw your attention to the 2015 data for math and look at how that grew over the 5 years to 74.2% proficient. And once again, when you're looking at your ELA has remained consistently high, which is hard to say at that level. When we look at the fourth grade as well, we see once again that same overall trend of growth, high success with science, but an overall consistency across the board. And this, once again, we are seeing, again, growth with our ELA moving from 82 to 87% proficient, which is a significant growth within this specific cohort data. We are seeing a little bit of a drop in math here, so once again, we're working with the building data teams to uncover that piece. But when we look at our dashboard, we are seeing that Upper Providence is meeting every one of these statewide 2030 targets. So we're blue in all of those categories. So holistically, we reflected as a curriculum team to talk about, well, what does this mean? And this is really, truly just a very small snapshot of some of our action plans for the elementary buildings and some of the pieces that our teachers have been working hard at and our curriculum supervisors and administrators have already had in place. Kindergarten through second grade for math, we're focusing on our small group instruction and using our targeted instruction for all levels, which will really help us dig down to the student level with this data. The whole principle of this idea is that you're using data to design your instruction. We're focusing on visual math and number sense. In third grade, we are really focusing on hands-on fraction studies, which is a good representation of our curriculum supervisor digging into the data and saying, hey, we need to look at this fractions. We need to look at this specific component. So while I haven't necessarily listed all of those specific areas, please know that that's what our teams are doing. They're looking to see, maybe we need to make a tweak with place value and number sense and dig into that part deeper. For ELA, you'll see the same type of action plans focusing on our Spring Forward learning. We're looking at connecting teachers and collaborative and reflective practices around student needs. I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of the meetings where we're looking at student data and really determining what the best interventions and the best support that is needed. Planning and providing strategies that focus on the whole child so that we're not only recognizing that, yes, academic student numbers are important, but sometimes that's not the only answer. Sometimes there are other interventions that we can support students with that are not academic in nature, and that also really taking the whole student approach in recognizing that. And finally, developing a 3-year analysis plan that supports students K-8 with close reading, analysis, and commitment to professional development for all of our teachers. As you know, we have our focus on Spring Forward learning, and my little plug here, SF Learns, hashtag SF Learns. If you follow us, you can see all of the wonderful jobs that our coaches and our teachers are doing. What's great about Spring Forward learning is that we have professional development every day occurring. And our coaches and our supervisors are constantly in there looking at how we can just promote the wonderful things that our students are doing and our teachers are doing. This represents a little bit about what the concept of Spring Forward learning is, and it really gets to the heart of the data that I presented for our elementary buildings, in that we want to be, our 2 main pillars is that we're responsive in our instruction and that we're assessment driven. So assessment is not something that just happens at the end of learning to prove that we know something. But we're using an entire system of assessment, whether that's teacher-created assessments, whether it's small targeted checks, whether it's NWA MAP and PSSA, to then be responsive to our student needs. So it's something that our coaches are working with on a regular basis and supporting our teachers on ongoing professional development. So moving into grades 5 and 6. You will see a very similar dashboard with the addition of the college and career measures, which is located on the right side, which was not applicable to the elementary schools. So in this instance, we are seeing in many regards that we are meeting or exceeding our targets and our interim targets with the one focus area of growth, academic growth for English language arts. When we look at a comparison for 5th, 6th grade, you will see that we are doing exceedingly well compared to our state. This is representing, again, that 5-year trend of our PSSA data. This is specifically 5th grade now. So what we are seeing is an overall high trend here. Again, some dips that we have to draw our attention to, but both for ELA and math, certainly high achievement across the board. This represents our 6th grade trend. Again, these are moving from 2015 to 2019. These are different groups of students that we're looking across the board. When we really hone into it, we find that our English language arts, we are meeting the 2030 statewide target, and that we are approaching the 2013 target, which is showing that we've already met the interim target as well. Moving into 7th grade, you'll see mostly blues in 7th grade, and one area where we're hitting the interim target. And once again, really high numbers as far as comparison to the state. When we look at our 7th grade data, what's really interesting when we go back to the cohort data, we are seeing that when students transition to a building, they do drop a little bit, and then over time, we're seeing growth. So this is not representing that cohort data, but this is showing us that we do expect some transition as students are changing buildings. We do expect some of that. But once again, when our students are with us, we're seeing growth over time, and the longer that they're with us, we're continuing to see that growth. This is what I was referring to as far as the cohort data. So when both of these lines are on the upward movement, and this trend moving from 2017 of 5th grade students moving up to 85%. Again, each year of this jump is representing a year's worth of growth and then some for many of our students. So we're really seeing some nice upward increases in this area. For 7th grade ELA and math, we've met the target for ELA, and we are quickly, very closely, very, very close to meeting the target for 2013 for math. Now we're going to move to 8th grade. 8th grade again shows examples of tremendous achievement, and we're seeing the blues and the greens, and then this is one area that we're going to dig into a little bit deeper. I know this was a topic that was discussed in last year's board meeting, so this is going to be something with 8th grade we're going to dig into a little bit deeper, and I'm going to try and see what's going on here. When you look at the state comparison, again, we're doing exceedingly very well. And then when you look at the overall 5-year trend of our PSSA data, you'll see that, once again, this is pretty consistent across the board as far as where we are. This is representing the 8th grade math percent proficient and advanced on PSSAs. So again, you're looking at 2015, and then this is representing the state average, and this is representing where we are at Springford. I mentioned earlier, I know that this was a topic last year. It's a topic across the state, I think, and this is really going to help us. I wanted to dig into this part a little bit deeper. So while we are far exceeding the state expectation for math, this is an area that we're continuing to look at. What this represents is our math cohort data, percent proficient advanced on PSSA by grade. So you're looking at your 4th grade in 2015, and you're seeing this consistent slight increase, and then we have a peak in 7th grade, and then it drops off in 8th grade. Again, this is not unlike what we see in the state, but what we don't see typically across the state is this peak here in 7th grade as high as it is. So this is definitely something that makes this dip a little bit more dramatic, but when you look at it across the board, it's a little bit more consistent if we didn't have that outlier. This graph represents where we currently stand within the ranking within Montgomery County schools. Again, this represents percent proficient and advanced. So we have our schools listed in the bottom as well. And when I did a deeper dig into this, I tried to look at some consistencies among relative size of schools, and that's definitely one of the things that I'm finding is that when we compare ourselves, not only across the district, you're looking at a wide variety of schools, a wide variety of demographics, size of schools. When we narrow that pool down a little bit more and we look at more comparable schools, we're actually doing a little bit better than this. So what I also did was look at the immediately surrounding school districts and identified where we are in comparison to our immediately surrounding school districts. So in the ones that are in our area, we are certainly doing the best among our immediately surrounding districts. This is an interesting slide because this represents our 8th grade data over 18 years. And this kind of shows, and it helps us to explain some of the data, not all of it, but helps us understand it a little bit. But as we're moving along here, this right here is the year that the 8th grade math PSSA changed. So what you'll see here is this top line is the state, the top line is Spring-Ford, the bottom line is the state. So you'll see that in many instances, we paralleled the state data that we expected to see, but what we have done is continue to grow over this, where we'll see the state data has plateaued a little bit. So it's just an interesting piece of data. I won't say that is the reason for the data, but I will say that is a piece of the reason that we certainly have to look at changing the assessment and how that's impacted us. When we look at our overall Future Ready Index, we're seeing our English Language Arts, again, has already met and exceeded the state target, and our math is approaching it, but we have some way to go as far as closing that gap. So while this does seem, this number does seem like something that we want to focus on, it is. It's an area that we want to help improve. We are happy and celebrating that we're meeting that interim target, but I will say I don't think for us as a district it's enough. We want to look at improving this, and I think that's something that everyone's on board with saying. We certainly want to continue working in that direction. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Nugent to discuss the 9 to 12 data.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. I know you've seen a lot of data, so we'll continue here with 9-12. So when you get to the high school level, obviously we're looking at a little bit different assessments. We're looking at our Keystone exams, which are subject exams, obviously end of course exams. So we're going to give you a little peek at that. We're going to look at our advanced placement results, our ACT and SAT results, and talk a little bit about what we're doing at that level. So just taking a snapshot, you've seen this throughout the evening, so you can take a look at what we have in front of us there, which is our English language assessment last year, or for last year's graduating class. Dr. Murray's referenced the target dates across the bottom of the line. You'll see that we're significantly above those in all the areas, which is a benefit to us. We've had ebb and flow a little bit. These numbers are slightly lower than last year's. It's a different cohort, but again, very consistent with our performance throughout. So that just gives you the idea. The middle is math and algebra and biology. You've heard Dr. Murray reference advanced and in some of our categories. Our largest advanced group is our science group. We have close to 60% or more advanced in science. And we have 57% advanced in math. And literature is our lower end, where we're around 20% advanced. So we do give our literature assessment in 9th grade. I don't know of another school in the state that does do that. Traditionally, I'll talk a little bit about remediation in a minute. I brought that up last year at one of our committee meetings. But that's our data from our Keystone exams. So you can take a look at our overall measurements. So you can see the high school has a little different setup than the other grades, because you're looking at on-track measurements, which would be attendance. And this one is not, you can see there's no score in this one here. That's not being calculated yet by the state. But one of the other things you see is college and career readiness. I point that out. You've heard a lot about Act 339. That's something that's a major part of our assessment, and you can see that we're doing well there, but we're not doing what we'd like to do. I think some of the board members have been involved in some of the committee level meetings where we've spoken about what type of opportunities we can provide for our students in the area of career readiness. So that's been a major focus of ours. Been working with the Future Planning Center on that. I think Mrs. Benner, when she was here, referenced that as well. So that's a continued focus for us. But you can see that, again, we are measuring in the blue and greens. One thing to point out is, when I see a downward arrow, of course, that grabs your attention, blue down, green, but there are moving targets as well. So while your cohort may and you heard Dr. Murray this, you may be experiencing growth, but the target moves each year that gets higher. So that's going to continue to reach 2030. But again, we're far exceeding anything that the state requires at this point. So we look at advanced placement. This is an 8-year trend. It goes back further, but to give you an idea, the darker blue is the number of, as you can see, the number of students that take the test. So if you go over here, this past year, we had 736 students take an AP exam, and we gave 1,339 exams. So you can see a significant difference since we started. The support of the board has been overwhelming in supporting us with additional AP classes, and we've always been very appreciative of that. So that does give us the opportunity to have these numbers, because if our AP courses didn't go up, our numbers wouldn't go up. So next year, I can tell you, our orders were just made for next year, and I don't have the exact, but we're right about, I think it's 1,540 exams have been ordered. That means that's how many students have registered. That's how many exams have been registered for, and we're right around the 800 mark for students. So if you take 800 students and you look at our school population 9 through 12, which is about 2,500, do the math, you can see we have a lot of students that participate in our advanced placement program. But the more important part, I think, are the scores. So if you look at our advanced placement scores for last year, this year here, you can see, so your 5 is the 319, and then you have the 391, so you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So our highest number of test takers results was a 4. And for those of you that don't know, most of you do, but if you look at colleges, universities, most colleges and universities many will accept a 3 as a passing grade and would allow credit to be earned for the universities. Some may be different, some don't accept it at all, but for the most part, colleges do accept a 3 as a passing grade. So you can see our scores have continually, it is what it is. You can see the numbers just keep going up. That's a testament to our students, but also to our advanced placement teachers. Remember, to be eligible to teach an advanced placement course, you must take a fairly significant training course. So we send teachers every summer, typically to LaSalle University, to take training to be eligible just to teach these. So this is a national curriculum, so this is a curriculum wherever you would be in the United States, you're taking the same course, because our syllabuses must be approved in an advanced placement audit process. So every one of our teachers has to be audited, and I have to approve that audit every year for our students to have that match for them to be able to get the credits in the colleges that they go to. So a little bit about advanced placement there. Let's see. One other thing. This is our Scholar, Advanced Placement Scholar. This is something they started 2012. They started it then. You can see the numbers that we've grown with. One thing I want to point out. So these are the Scholar levels that they have, and we do put this in our gymnasium lobby. Many of you may see it when you come in. We post these students' names and give them recognition that way. But one thing new I'd like to point out, you see AP Capstone Diploma and AP Seminar and Research, and within the last month, I think we had a presentation from our teachers. And if you look down here, you can see we had 15 students receive a Capstone Diploma, and 10 of our students receive a Seminar Research Certificate. So that's pretty significant. We are excited about that. This is a new program for us, and already we have students performing at a very high level. So that's something new that you see did not exist over here. Not because we didn't have anybody necessarily, but this College Board just started reporting that information. So there are AP Scholars. One of the things that I pointed out is the National Scholar, which is the 0 over here that you see. We finally had 1 in 2014, and now you see we've grown. We had 22 National Scholars this past year. So that's our advanced placement data. Move into ACT. So ACT is a subject test. It's math, science, English, and social sciences, I think. I have it right up here. So anyway, the significance with ACT is it's not your typical score point where SAT, everyone's familiar with, an 800 or 1600 score. ACT, the highest score that you can attain is a 36. So these are average numbers, and you can see over the course of time, one of the biggest significant pieces that you don't see in this particular slide are the number of test takers. Our number of test takers, when we first started giving the assessment, we had about 30 test takers. We're now into the 300s of test takers. Again, remember that students can participate in ACT or SAT, and many of them do both, because colleges often will allow you to choose which one you want to send as your score point for colleges. So that's our changes there. So that is English trends. So you can see it's fairly insignificant, 24 to 23. We've had up and down on that. We continue to look at this data, continue to dive into it to see where we can make changes in curriculum, et cetera. But moving forward, these are the math trends. You can see, so this year you're looking at this, the Springford is the dark blue and the light blue being the state. You can see we had a little dip there. We're up here high for a little bit. You can see we dipped down there. So very significant, steady performance. Reading trended higher this year as a 25.1. Again, this is an average of all the students. So one thing the ACT does, it gives you a career ready number. I don't have that in the slides, but I can tell you that our students far exceed the career readiness for college level work. Matter of fact, the state average exceeds the college level number that they have. So that's just a point of reference for you. So that's reading, and then science. So again, science, we were 24.3. Last year we were 24.5. So you're talking insignificant numbers, but again, steady performance. The difference is the number of test takers, which we don't have here, but if you saw that, it would be pretty much like that, pretty much as the advanced placement was. So I apologize, I don't have that in there. So we look at the SAT. Now remember, the SAT was a reasoning test. Many of us remember that maybe when we were in school, but now they switched. So there was a significant change in 2016. They switched to a subject test, pretty much mirroring the ACT. So that's these results that you see. The 3-year trend is really with the new assessment. And you can see that our 3-year assessment for the SAT is in this particular, so you can see math. So readings on this side, so you can see we were fairly consistent. We were 579 last year, 577 this year, and math, we went up 1. But you get your total there, and then you can see the PA average, which, again, we put the PA average up there. I think it's important for you to see it. I understand that's not the level that we're expecting, but I just think it's important to see the PA average. It gives you an idea of where that is. One of the things I looked at last year, I didn't dive into it yet this year, is I looked at the number of test takers we have. You would be surprised. We are one of the largest schools in the state. So when you look at the number of test takers we had, which last year was borderlining 500 test takers, in the state of Pennsylvania, we rank very, very high, top 10 for our performance in SAT. So I know sometimes the board's interested in hearing those numbers, so I share that with you. So this is the last slide. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Murray, but I did want to point out, again, there's some significant changes in the graduation requirements, and if you're, as a board member, you may stay abreast of that, but those are data points that have not even been configured yet. So for students to graduate from high school in the state of Pennsylvania, the graduation requirements have changed significantly in the last 2 years. And matter of fact, the PDE has not even finalized. Talked to you about that the other day, Mr. Cerisi. The state has not even finalized the criteria yet for what graduation requirements should look like for our junior class. So they're not even it's not even established yet. So there's some things that are really, really troubling to us, but at the same time, Dr. Murray's been in the meetings and Mr. Rizzo's been in the meetings. We're trying to stay abreast of that information, trying to make sure that our students are prepared the way they need to be. I feel comfortable that they are, but one of the things, and it's a significant piece, and I bring this up for this reason. First, I would just want to say, the Keystone exams begin in 7th grade. So that data that I just shared with you, that data included 7th grade students. It also included 8th grade students. And it included, of course, our 9th grade students in Dr. Weidenball's building, because they were the last group of students to take the Algebra 1 assessment. So that's banked data. So you see that data then is compiled and shared now. So biology, the same thing. We have biology students in 9th grade. We have biology students in 10th grade. And then all of our English students, literature, take the assessment in grade 9. Prior to this year, we were permitted to provide, matter of fact, we were mandated to provide remediation before we could even give a retest, because a lot of these results are as a result of retesting. We pick up a lot of students after remediation and retesting for a variety of different reasons without getting into the political end of things. Students, spring forward, high school, no high school, we are not permitted to mandate remediation anymore. Some people are in favor of that, whatever the case may be, that's whatever point of view you want to take. The point is, we would take students that didn't perform in the assessments and we would place them into remedial classes to help them to be proficient in these areas that the state mandated. We are not permitted to do that anymore. So we would now be giving retests to students that have not had remediation, which seems somewhat not smart in some respects. So with that being said, I just point that out because that is one thing that we're up against. And with that being said, we have a level of concern that our scores may not appear as fantastic as they have in recent years with that. And it's not a secret, it's not something that people aren't aware of. If you dive into it and you learn a little bit about it, you would see that. So I just point that out as another piece because that's a frustrating part for us. There's a new pathway system for graduation. There's some composite scores that should be out there that aren't out there yet because there's different pathways for students to attain their graduation requirements. So that's a whole nother presentation for another day. I just wanted to point out the piece about remediation. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Murray for any questions that you all may have. I know that was a lot of information, so Dr. Murray, and I, of course, would answer anything that you might have as well.
How many of the students don't want to take the remediation? Is it a small percentage? Is it a large percentage?
Well, this year we couldn't give it, so we offered it, and we had, Dr. Collier, how many?
In the building,
Less than 10 students are taking it this year. Last year we probably had 90 because we made them take it.
Do they give a reason why they don't want to take the remediation? Or?
Well, they've typically passed the course, the class, and they've moved on. They're in another level class, and they've moved on, and they're not interested in it at this point. I mean, because basically they have, in essence, the pathways now provide a path for you to get to your graduation minus passing the test necessarily.
So they passed the test, but they formerly would have needed remediation just to get the scores up.
No, you can't retake the test if you passed it. So you may, so they would have been, I'm sorry, for clarity, they would have been below basic or below basic to retake the test. They may have passed the class but not the test, or they may have passed the test, and not the class. We had it both ways.
Dr. Murray, you had mentioned that the transition from buildings impacts scores. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, anecdotally, I think that there's always some degree of when you're moving buildings, it's shifting to a new environment, new teachers, new schedule. Those are all pieces that do impact. So I think that can impact students. It can impact their focus. Again, they might be changing curriculum. Perhaps you're moving from everyday math to a new math program. So that might be some of the shift that we see, but I do think that echoes some of the trends that are seen in other districts of when you move buildings, that sometimes that does occur. I won't say it's the only reason why it occurs, but it could be potentially one of them.
So how do we overcome that problem then?
So I actually posed that same question, and I think what it comes to is looking at our transition plans. How are we transitioning students from building to building? How are they feeling supported? And are there, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, are there other aspects that are maybe not academic that we do need to focus on, social, emotional, the whole child, that will help support students during that transition?
Should we look at the older model where a lot of districts do, where they have a pure middle school with 6th, 7th, and 8th to minimize that impact?
I think that you might see the same type of trends, it's just where they're occurring. So I mean, there's most districts see trends that are similar. I couldn't speak to exactly what those trends are, but I think if you just shift that, you might just end up seeing that trend just happen in a different location. So I think what's important is that we're recognizing that we might see a dip there, but then again, looking at what our NWEA data is telling us, looking at what the other pieces. The NWEA data is new for us as a district. This is only in our second year, but it gives us a great opportunity to use not only as a predictor for how students are doing, but to have benchmarks a little bit sooner so that we're not waiting till the end of the year to say, okay, the student struggled in this area. So now we can use that data a little bit more proactively to see, are our students getting to where they need to go? Do we need to change instruction along the way? So I think it's a combination of both.
We also seem to have plateaued within a range for pretty much all the schools through 8th grade. Is there a way we can break out of that plateau and go to the next level? Because I think one of the important comparisons is not just to the state or to the surrounding area, but schools that are similar demographics to ours, and how do we perform against those? at the bottom, in the middle, at the top? Because I think that's a more important measure than schools that are not like ours.
Absolutely. It's kind of hard when you look at data like this to really pinpoint exactly what the impact is of whether it's an initiative or any of the other pieces that you're doing, and to say this is the reason for the data. So I think absolutely we will look into that further. We'll look to see, what is our, not only this year's data, but what has the past data been telling us to see, is there something we need to make an adjustment? And by having more data, such as the MAP assessment, or by having more of these pieces, it can help us do that a little bit more effectively.
And lastly, the 8th grade math scores are poor, not just for Springford, but for, it seems like the state, is it because 8th grade math is too difficult? Or, I mean, why is it pretty universal that it's not very good?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of factors at play here. In 8th grade, students are taking a lot of assessments. They take ELA, math, science. They may also take the Keystone as well. So you're looking at an 8th grade student taking more assessments to begin with, and when they're taking them. Also, you might have an instance where a student might not be in 8th grade math anymore. They may be taking algebra or geometry or beyond. In principle, you would think, well, they should be fine with the 8th grade PSSAs, but in some instances, they might be removed from some of the content that they're just not using regularly or refreshing regularly. So I think we need to look at the growth data a little bit more specifically with 8th grade and look, again, down to individual students to see how they're performing. What I did do is look at how the 8th grade is then translating to Keystone assessments. And although we're not happy with how that 8th grade score looks, we're not seeing the same thing with 8th grade. We're seeing students are scoring very well in Keystone, I apologize, we're not seeing the same thing with Keystones. So we're seeing that we have a peak in 7th grade, that 8th grade number is low, but then when we look at our Keystone data, it's significantly higher again. So I think that draws our attention specifically to the 8th grade and looking at not only the assessment, how they're assessed. I will say in feedback that I received, the content of that 8th grade is difficult, but again, you have all of those factors coming in. Some students might not even be in the class, sitting in the class of the assessment that they're taking.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to one of the things that Mr. Dennett brought up, because this is the same thing I brought up last year, so I'm going to bring it up again this year. When you're going through most of those slides, that's really great to keep showing where we are with the state average. I've said this last year, we're nowhere near. State average is out of 500 schools, that means we're comparing ourselves to school ranked at 250, right? What we'd like to get, I have asked for this before, I want to see and we don't have to mention them this evening, but there's probably 10 to 12 other school districts in the state of Pennsylvania that we need to be looking at, and we need to be comparing our data to their data. That's what's important. Comparing us to our surrounding school districts is fine, but again, we're comparing apples and oranges when looking at certain school districts compared to Springford. So I know one of your slides is when you show where we are at the state average and as far as what the 30-year projection is and all that, that's fine. But all the other slides, your blue slides basically by each school, and it showed the state average, it doesn't matter. It means nothing. Because if we rank anywhere near that state average, then we got a real problem. And we don't want to put that slide up because we have a real problem, right? I'm only kidding about not putting the slide up. But the other thing is that we've asked this question, and it's, things to look at. I'm curious to know if that correlation with that 8th grade graph has anything to do with the switch over to everyday math. Because when you look at the trends over the last, would you say 18 plus years or whatever it was, and you see a growing trend, right? And then all of a sudden, we came up with this two major concepts, everyday math and Common Core, which anybody that has would sit here and argue that point is, are they really viable solutions to teaching math? And we could probably spend the next 2 hours debating that. My answer is no, so I just cut it down by 2 hours. But I'm just curious to see if there's a connection between that over that period of time when all of a sudden there was this push and switch over to, because you said something earlier that I found very intriguing, which was always been my point every time when we talk about everyday math. When I learned math, when I went through from kindergarten all the way through school. And I've had, in the college, I've had calculuses and all the high level maths, all the, you know what I mean? So but I learned math, right? So as I went from one grade to the next and the next higher level math, I was pulling all those math concepts. So if I sit down and, you know, if I went from 7th grade and I went into 8th grade, if I really truly understood those math concepts, even though I'm in Algebra 1 now, or Algebra 2, whatever I may be in 8th grade, I still should be able to apply those math concepts that I've learned, you know, through my elementary school and middle school. You know, so, and I really want to see that. I'm really curious about that. We, you know, each year we do see schools and then we do see dips and changes. What is important to see if there's any trends in a particular school of a downward trend, and, you know, which makes us need to look closer at, you know, why is that happening? I think there was only 1 or 2 schools where we've seen a drop, you know, over the last couple of years. So we need to look closer and see why that's happening. I do agree with you when you mentioned about Spring City, because it's such a small sampling size. 1 or 2 kids could have a significant change on the end result. So that is a true statement, and we need to, you know, be, you know, aware of that as well. Although we see a lot of good things come out of Spring City as well. So, but again, it goes back to really, let's look at, like I said, there's 10 to 12 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania that we should be looking at. I liked your comparison when you talked about where we're ranking within Montgomery County, because a few of those school districts that I'm referring to are in Montgomery County, and we're right up there with them. And then there's a couple of districts in Chester County and that we want to be looking at. But you also said something, I wanted you to just go back to it real quick. I didn't catch it, but when you said when you were talking about comparing us to other school districts in Montgomery County, then you made a statement in there somewhere, but when you take away, we're even performing even better than what we're showing. And I wanted to, if you could kind of circle back to that.
Sure. In that slide, I was referring to all of our Montgomery County schools are vastly different. We have some really large districts that don't really compare either demographically or size-wise. But I think that when I started to narrow down and look at schools that were similar, we did rise to the top of those more similar schools within Montgomery County. So while I did show kind of the vast changes of them, when I started to kind of peel back a little bit more.
When you say similar, you're talking size-wise or demographics-wise? Both size and demographics. All right, well, that, again, that's interesting data. That's what we want to see compared to, because, and it's sad. And we've all talked about this, that the testing that has to occur, because we don't want to teach to the test. We definitely don't want to do that. But on the flip side, this is the way it is. I mean, we have to have these standard tests in place to see how we're doing. So it is measurable, but then we don't want to get crazy with testing, and we certainly don't teach to the test.
Well, in my response in reference to teaching to the test from a curriculum standpoint, it's not teaching to the test, it's understanding what is being tested. And I like to give the comparison of the driver's ed test. We all know going into that, we need to be able to parallel park and do these 15 skills. And it's the same thing whether it's math or ELA. If we're walking into an assessment and we know we haven't covered what's the standards that really drives that, then, you know, we're sending our students in with a hole or a gap. So I think we really use those standards not to teach to the test, but to make sure that our students feel prepared and that we are covering the content that is expected to know.
And that's an extremely important what you said there, because we don't teach to the test, but we're making sure that we're teaching all the aspects of what the students would or could see within those tests. Thank you. Any other questions? Does anyone have a question for Dr. Nugent? I feel bad he did all that presentation. Oh, you did ask him one, that's right. Okay, I didn't want you to slip away. No, that's just, I mean, you know, overall, we don't want to give them, I mean, same thing I said last year. I mean, here at Springford, we continually want to raise that bar of education, and I know the staff and administration keep raising that bar, you know, and keep giving our students, you know, opportunity to raise that bar of education. So we in a sense, sometimes could be tougher
in asking these questions, and our expectations are higher, maybe, right? But we, as a board, truly believe, and I'm sure our teachers as well, truly believe that our students are more than capable and have the ability to rise to that, to that level, because they over the years have done outstanding, here with having the proper education and the tools in place, and I expect that to continue. But, as a school district, we want to keep raising that bar, because if we didn't, you would be doing this presentation and we would be at the state average.
And truthfully, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's such an important concept, that students will always rise to what our expectations are. And our expectations, when we look at the curriculum, our curriculum is always going to be the floor, because that's where we want to start, but we want students above that. And I think that's what's really important, is that, do we have areas we need to focus on? Absolutely. Do we have areas that we're celebrating? Absolutely. But it's not good enough to say, here's where we are, let's move on. We have to dig deeper, and we have to get down to the student level, and that's what our administrators are doing with our teams every day. They're having conversations down to the student level of how each individual student's doing and what their needs are, and I think that's where we're going to see the impact.
And I think the other important factor, you said it tonight, and I said it last week in my report, is that here in Springford, we have PD happening every single day. So we are rising the bar, whether it's within our teaching staff, which also then raises the bar for our students. So the fact that we are able to do that, the fact that our coaches are in the classroom and are providing that resource to these teachers, is a huge step in putting us above the averages and looking at where we want to be next. And Tom is absolutely right. We don't want to compare ourselves to the state, and we have talked about that for more than a couple of years. But it's very difficult, I know, with the timing of this data and the timing of this presentation, to try to filter the information that you have to get to what are the schools that we want to compare ourselves to, and prepare that lengthy of a presentation. But it is important to know that we are far and above where we need to be in 30-30. While we're not satisfied with that, is exactly what Tom has said, as well as Mark, we need to look at how we're going to increase those. So it's that, never be stagnant, never be stale, and what's next, and how are we going to continue to, raise that bar. And that's always been the challenge of curriculum, of even Dr. Nugent in bringing new courses to the table. That's always the challenge, is what is the next thing to do for these kids? And, and obviously, as even Dr. Nugent said, one of the biggest things that's going to challenge this particular building is the 339 standards, and what we do with that moving forward. And yes, I appreciate the fact that Dr. Nugent indicated that we did a lot of discussion and a lot of work in the committee about how that's going to look, what we can do with it. It's also important to know that it does impact this data. So thank you.
Dr. Nugent, one question. In your presentation, you mentioned the term career readiness.
Yes.
How do you measure that, since we have kids at different levels and different paths?
Well, there is criteria that's been placed by the state in certain areas that the students would participate in for career readiness. So, for example, right now we are looking at we're using a new system called Smart Futures. We're looking at, and I think we talked about this in previous meetings, but we're looking at their interests. So it's like an interest inventory that we're using, and it has lessons in there. It helps us determine where their interests are so that we can try to help students get into that next placement. So one of the goals that we have is to expand upon our opportunities for students to get outside of the building into internship or even co-op, similar to our technical school students. So our technical school students have awesome opportunities, and our on-track readiness numbers are really where they are because the two programs, Tech School and our IEP students that are in our STEP program, they have career readiness opportunities now, where our current or the rest of our student body does not have that same opportunity. So we're looking at programs to bring to the board, which we already have, and you supported us last year by adding to our future planning center staff to help make that happen. So I know it doesn't pinpoint an answer to you, but we're trying to find out where the student's interest is and how we can properly point them in the right direction to get experiences in those areas before they go on to the next level.
All right, thank you.
One thing I think is maybe humorous, or maybe not, that the goals for 2030 they're setting them now, but the standards and the assessments will probably be much different.
Yeah, you make a great point.
8, 9, 10 years from now,
It's a moving target. Yeah. Well, in my tenure here, which has been a while, but I can tell you the measure that we've been accountable for has changed probably 4 significant times in my tenure as principal. So we've had discussions at this table, at this meeting several times, but if we went back to the tape, they'd been different because they've changed the target. So it's very difficult, as you know, when you're trying to achieve something, if you're not sure what you're trying to achieve because they're changing it as fast as you're trying to get to where you are. I mean, that's a reality of it. It's just, and you're right. So you're right. It will change. It might change. It will change before the next couple of years.
And I think it'll be interesting to track that change compared to how many schools within the state are meeting or exceeding where that 2030 target is. And if they're meeting or exceeding it far before that, we're going to probably see.
Well, if you remember, the original No Child Left Behind, the requirement was that every single student in the state of Pennsylvania would have 100% proficiency by the year 2014. You remember that? That was a great plan, right? Because everyone would have been 100% proficient in 2014. What happened was you got closer and closer to 2014, and the people in Harrisburg started realizing, I'm not going to make it. So changes started to come about. It's that simple. So that No Child Left Behind was rewritten and revamped, and now it's Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, where some students, we require in Pennsylvania the Keystone assessments, the algebra, biology, and literature. Other states have adopted using SAT scores. Every student has to take the SAT and meet a score. That's why the state is establishing benchmark scores for the ACT, the SAT, the ACT, and advanced placement students. So in theory, a student could say, hey, I'm going to take the advanced placement class, I'm going to get a 3 in this assessment, I don't even want to bother taking the Keystone exams. If that occurs, our scores are going to go even further down. Someone's going to say, why am I going to come out of class for 6 days, take those Keystone exams, when you're telling me that an advanced placement score could meet my pathway, when they're going to take advanced placement classes anyway. So while I agree with Mr. DeBella, and I agree, you know how I am with rankings and wanting to be at the top, that's going to be a wild game in the next couple of years if that starts to happen, where students just choose not to take the test.
Maybe those rankings aren't really relevant. It should be what we think is where we want our students to be and work towards that, because in many cases we can roll out of bed and meet the state standards with our students, but maybe we need our own goals that are real achievement as opposed to some bureaucrats' measure of achievement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's, we got these committee reports, and I'm going to try this again. Let's see if we could kind of whiz through these. I don't believe there's a lot that we're missing. So, Ershka, we want to have a student report?
Should I put it, is it gonna be a thing?
I don't know, you have one up there?
Yeah, we have.
Where's the? Oh. All right, how about we see if you can get that set up, we'll circle back around you, okay? Dr. Dressler.
The Western Montgomery Career and Technology Center Joint Operating Committee met on November the 4th. It was also a night where we had a community dinner, and we must compliment Mrs. Arndt and her crew for a fine presentation, a lot of smiling faces there from the community. During this meeting, we started off announcing that 4 members of the board are retiring from the board. along with the Secretary, Mrs. Lewis. The board members received a very nice glass statue to commemorate their service to the Western Center. 26 students, talking about co-op programs, we have 26 students now in the co-op program and 3 more that are filling out the paperwork. So I think that's something that we're really proud of. I think this is a terrific initiative that the Western Center has accomplished in getting these students out there working in the fields that they're interested in. 100 new students have been applying to get into the Western Center programs. On November the 14th, we had another Girls' Night Out meeting with 65 young women attending to introduce them to what we would consider as non-traditional directions or employment. And so it was a very nicely attended Girls' Night Out open house. On December the 11th, there will be a Western Center open house for people that want to see the fine programs that the Western Center has available. And on January the 13th, the next community dinner will be coming up, so get your name on the list there quickly, because that always fills up rather quickly. A new program, a new event that's going to be held is an indoor car show for a change with a crafts fair on February the 29th from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. That's on a Saturday. So please try to attend that and support the Western Center. And for Spring-Ford students, we must acknowledge that one of our students that is attending, one of our students that's attending the Western Center, Olivia Ramondi, was the first officially licensed cosmetologist, and she is now gainfully employed. So our commendation goes out to Ms. Ramondi. That is the end of my Western Center report. Any other members of the committee that want to add to that?
I'd just like to make a brief addition, and that is that we had a number of students and faculty members out in Las Vegas for the SEMA show, and they will be giving a presentation in January on that, but from what I've heard, it was very difficult to even get the kids away from the convention center with what they've learned and experienced at this convention has been so life-changing for our students that, you know, while it was a huge undertaking, and we sent folks out there last year to just make sure it was going to be copacetic to send our students to Vegas, and you know, when you say you're sending students to Vegas, that's always a little unnerving, but we had no behavior issues, and the fact that, again, these kids were incredibly well behaved. I know that I talked to the automotive teacher who said that he's been approached by several schools and said, how did you get this to happen? We would love to see more of the CTCs attending this type of a show because of how much the kids are able to take away from it. So again, I think it is a great thing that we as a board supported that initiative to move forward with that, and the success is amazing for these kids.
I think you did a fine job, as always, with your report.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Denner. You're so kind.
Well, why don't you, now that you're warmed up, why don't you do the PSBA?
Oh, you think I'm warmed up? Okay.
I hope so.
Great. It's time for the board to think about appointing a new PSBA liaison, and I hope that whoever is appointed will be willing to go to the PSBA meetings and maybe the National School Board Association meetings, as well as attending some of the local PSBA meetings that are held throughout Montgomery County. So when you pick your new liaison, make sure that this is a person who has the time and inclination to participate fully in the PSBA activities. And speaking of activities, there is a new director and advanced director training program being offered to school board members at Radnor High School. That's on Saturday, December the 7th, from 9 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. Lunch will be provided. I think there's a small fee that is required. This is held in Wayne, Pennsylvania at the Radnor High School. There are several House bills that PSBA has been supporting. I don't know whether I want to mention all those. I don't want to step on Mrs. Melton's report, or maybe Mr. Cerisi. I think he's hiding back there somewhere. Just to mention briefly that PSBA helped to stop a school voucher bill with House Bill 1800, and they're also dealing with anti-vaping bills, and also a bill has been passed to restore the school police arrest powers, which I'm sure our security people will be happy to know, and that bill has been signed, or is going to be signed probably by the governor very soon. Mrs. Melton, do you have a comment on that? You have all those? Okay, well, I'll let you fill in the meat on those.
Well, just before you do the rest of Christina's report,
I just touched on a few things.
the bill that Dr. Dress was referring to was the bill that I was talking about the last couple of meetings where I was working with Senator Manchin, Senator Regan to get that reestablished. And for the public, our police officers aren't security guards; they're actually Springport police officers. So, and it's very important because that's the bill, and there's makes references to the bill, the differences between police officers, security guards, and school resource officers. So, Christina, was there anything other they want to cover?
Yeah, I actually have a couple.
Well, you don't need to go through them all because most of those are going to.
I have a couple, I said.
Okay, good.
You don't want all of my pages?
No.
Just a couple quick things. One, Special Education Funding Formula Commission should be getting a report out by the end of the month, so it's something to be keeping our eyes open for. Also, charter reform continues to move forward, and the governor has laid out a three-pronged approach for that. So again, more to come. DPE is working on some regulations and looking for some input. In terms of the bills that I just wanted to touch base on, there's CTE, Courses and Resources Advisory Committee Grants and Workforce Development was signed by Governor Wolf on October 30th. That was Act 76. There are a number of bills that have passed both in the House and Senate and been signed by both and are awaiting the governor's signature, including House Bill 49, which is what Dr. Dressler was referring to. It actually is focused on requirements for application of a business finance course for students, but then amended to that was also the safety and security and reestablishing authorities for school police. So that was presented to the governor for signature on November 22nd, still awaiting signature. Also, Senate Bill 473, which has been passed, is awaiting governor's signature. We expect that to come shortly. It raises the minimum legal age to purchase tobacco products, including vaping products, from 18 to 21. Also, candidates for office of school director will be required to submit 10 signatures for nomination. That's something that is now being applied consistently. That is awaiting signature. And the sale of vaping products to minors and use of tobacco items on school properties is also awaiting signature. One thing to note that is not school specific, but is just something, good information for our community is Senate Bill 421, which is now Act 77, did eliminate straight party voting in the state of Pennsylvania, so it's something to be aware of, and will change the way we move forward on certain things. Other than that, the two key things that are coming up, one is cyber charter reform, which has passed the House and is now in the Senate, on the Senate floor, and that is focused on the ethics requirements for charter, cyber charters, and it's something that we looked at earlier in the year, and it's now coming back up. And then Senate Bill 751, which changes educator evaluator systems, focusing really more attention on observation of our teaching staff as opposed to focusing on the test and how the students are performing through standardized assessments. So again, those are likely to continue to move forward. As I said, Mr. DeBello, I have a bunch more. But at this point, both the House and Senate are in recess and will reconvene the House on December 16th with additional sessions on the 17th and 18th, and the Senate will reconvene on the 18th, and that will be their last session for 2019.
I think the whole cyber charter,
It's just the ethics element. It's just that one piece.
Yeah,
that talks to, they're not allowed to say that it's free education, or there's all that kind of.
Yeah, so just be careful with, because there's no reform or anything with cyber. It's just really.
This is just the ethics piece.
Yeah.
That first piece, there were 3 bills that had been presented earlier in the year, and then probably that were being pushed in the June timeframe, and this was the one that was more favorable. PSBA and the other agencies were supportive of this element. So.
And the whole charter school reform is starting to die also again, so we probably won't see much of anything there.
No, there won't be.
Any other questions? MCI met last Wednesday. Other than normal business, the only thing I have to report of importance is the executive director, Dr. John George, will be retiring from the IU next year. So that was kind of disheartening because he's done tremendous things, bringing the Montgomery County IU to being one of the top IUs in the state. Good news, well, I'm not sure if it's public where he's going, so I won't report that yet. But come January at the IU, we will be focusing on figuring out how, not if, but how and when we will be moving forward with replacing him. The goal would be to have a transition plan so we'd get somebody in place where there'd be a few months, 3 to 4 months maybe, of overlay where he could help bring that person up to speed as far as running the IU and continuing forward with the expectations of the IU committee or the board. Any questions? Superintendent's report? Superintendent's report? Do you have anything? Okay.
All right. I'd like to start off this evening. We had said last week that we had had an open house for our new addition. So we've got a little 2-minute video that I'd like to show real quick that we put together about that for that evening or that morning.
What our primary goal and focus was to provide the best educational environment for all our students. And that's been our goal. It's been my goal since being on the board. I started 10 years ago, and we've always been striving to provide the best educational experience for all our students. That's why Spring-Ford is ranked as one of the top school districts in Pennsylvania. That's why we take on these huge projects, because we want to ensure that we continue in the path of being one of the top school districts in the state of Pennsylvania. And what you'll see today is quite amazing.
It's not a matter of when we're going to do it, if we're going to do it. It's do we have the will to do it? And today we're recognizing, acknowledging that we indeed at Spring-Ford have the will to do something really great that will benefit our students as they come through our programs. We want to thank all of those who were part of this decision, who had the courage to make this decision.
What's very exciting to me is the multifaceted opportunity of this room. You know, of course you have the athletics. Most people look at it as weightlifting as for athletics, but it's much more than that. You know, it's for working in our curriculum, physical education classes, for intramural weightlifting, for not students that maybe aren't playing athletics that want to live it. And one of the most exciting pieces of it is how it's not just going to strengthen our body, but it's going to strengthen our mind and give us all much more confidence in what we do in the daily life.
It's increased my performance as a teacher in the sense that I'm actually given the space to teach what I need to teach. In the old facility, we were not able to kind of teach proper posture and setting of the band because we didn't have the space to do it. So in here, we're actually allowed to spread out the kids and give them a more authentic setting because it's more similar to our stage size. So we're able to get a more realistic idea of what they'll sound like in a performance, whereas the other one, we didn't have that capability.
The new hallway, the new corridor, that was really to take our two buildings from both sides. Because this is a unique building. We have a second floor, two second floors, and you have to go down to get up. So it's a tough task. So what we did is we tried to do the best we could in the most economical fashion was that we created two corridors that are parallel to each other. And we try to work at a one-way scenario during the lunch hours. It's still not perfect, but I'll tell you right now, when you're taking all these kids and splitting them in half and putting them on two separate spots, it's been a great relief for the students.
That's the little announcement to make sure you subscribe to RCTV, a little plug there.
Okay, how many Rams are there in the new athletic facility? Because
424.
that's it?
Yep.
Wow, it looked like more than that.
Also, this week we are doing our parent-teacher conferences. We started that today. Actually, we started last week in the evening, but we started a full day today, and we'll be continuing that tomorrow. It's always encouraging to see the number of parents who are actively involved in their children's education, and that's very evident when you start looking around at the number of participants at our parent-teacher conferences. So we will be running that tomorrow. We have a shortened week this week because of the Thanksgiving holiday, so let me just take the opportunity to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, and please enjoy the time with your family. It's so important. And then lastly, I just want to while we will recognize our off-going board members in just a little bit, I do want to formally thank our off-going board members for the time that they've served the district and certainly for the support they've given the administration in pushing forward initiatives. And we definitely needed board support for many of these things. And so we appreciate all that you've done to enhance and advance the program here at Spring-Ford. So thank you.
Any questions? Solicitor's report?
Just briefly, and a reminder for everybody that next Monday evening at 7:30, the board will convene for what is known as the reorganization meeting, where the board will seat its new board members and appoint through election officers to the new board. That'll be next Monday evening.
Okay, any questions? So let's circle right back around to Ishka. You're all set? This is going to be awesome, right? There you go.
Okay, so this is me and Jules' November student report. So what happened? Thanksgiving break begun. The 5th and 6th Center had their musical production. The high school had their fall play, which was The Diary of Anne Frank. The ribbon cutting ceremony, which welcomed the public to the new fitness center, the new hallway, as well as the new band room, which we just saw the video of. The middle school had their winter play, the start of Q2 and the end of Q1, and Halloween parties for the elementary schools, as well as their parades. And me and Jules went to, I think it was Brook Elementary, and we have pictures of, on the next slide. Okay, there you go. So there's pictures, the first, I think there's 4 pictures up on there, as well as pictures from the ceremony. So we went to Brooks Elementary, we talked to some of the students, we saw the parade. We asked them, like, can we just talk about their daily lives and how much they are enjoying? I think the one on top is 4th grade and the one on bottom is 3rd grade. So what's coming up? There are holiday shops happening at the elementary schools. Winter keystones for high schoolers. There's the winter holiday like concerts and stuff. For the music, the high school has theirs, the chorus has theirs, band. Winter break, the semi-formal dance for 11th and 12th grade students, as well as dino nights for LES, for Limerick Elementary School and Royersford Elementary School. That's kind of it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to break from our agenda real quick because we have an opportunity to recognize a few of our board members who have decided to retire from the Spring-Ford School Board. And it's a tradition that we started a few years ago where we last time I did this, it took me an hour to break into it. So we have gotten these nice rams that are engraved to each of the school board members, and it's thank you for your years of service for the Spring-Ford Area Board of School Directors, with the years engraved in when they were on the board. We also have a recognition from PSBA, one of Dr. Dressler's favorite groups. And as the board president, I get the great opportunity to recognize each outgoing member. There is also a statement that PSBA sent along with their awards that I'm not going to read the entire thing, but what they're saying is, I'll read the first paragraph. The legacy of the school board service is firmly embedded in the history of our nation and its commitment to public education. The Pennsylvania Boards of Association, founded in 1895, has a rich history as the first school board association established in the United States. And it goes on to recognize and talk about the principles of being a school board member, and somewhere in there it talks about how it is a thankless job. And I think anybody sitting here would know that no matter how hard we try to do the best we can for the community and our students, from time to time, believe it or not, some people get upset. But we won't focus on that because we have done awesome things here at Spring-Ford. And one of the things that we have done awesome is that we were able to teach Dr. Dressler some things about physics.
Ooh, wait, let me get my pencil.
Because for those of you who know that Dr. Dressler has a PhD in physics, and he's taught at Penn State for, what, 30 years?
Well, now I have a friend for my Nittany Lions.
There you go. Right, counterpart. But Dr. Dressler came onto the board, and I want to get the right year, in 2009. Actually came on the same year that I came on. That's what stands out that year. We came on together.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. And he had a brief hiatus, and he came back in 2015. But Dr. Dressler has been a tremendous asset to the Spring-Ford School Board. One of his many primary focuses have always been curriculum, but within the curriculum, one of the things that were near and dear to his heart was the science in motion. He was an advocate for that program. There was a time when funding dried up for that program, and Dr. Dressler felt very strong about the need to try to continue that through not only Spring-Ford, but other school districts in the area, and went out and fought and tried to find funding to help that program continue forward. Through his hard efforts, eventually that program has continued on. It was a solid program, but Dr. Dressler, like I said, was very instrumental in ensuring that program continued, and I'm sure that would be one of the things that are on his list of proud accomplishments. That Dr. Dressler was here with us as we became an average district. to where we are today, being considered one of the top districts in the state of Pennsylvania. He was, like I said, a big advocate for the sciences. He added many suggestions and for us to look at different curriculum ideas related to the sciences, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity and thank Dr. Dresser for being part of the board and everything that he has done.
Is there time for me to say a few words? Okay. Because, you know, I have a big mouth too.
Well, I was gonna say we are gonna make your dry sense of humor.
Well, I just have a few things to say, if I may. Is that all right? Yeah. As you mentioned, 10 years ago, when I first came on the board and the administration was much different from what it is now. We had a much loved and, shall we say, indefatigable Dr. Marcia Herda as our superintendent. I was assigned as a member of the curriculum committee and a representative for the Western Center, as I've been every year that I've been on the board. But some strange things started to happen. The superintendent decided to retire shortly after that. The assistant superintendent decided to retire. The curriculum director quit. The Western Center director moved on. And even one of our board members quit midterm and moved to Florida. Is there a cause and effect here, or is it just a coincidence? Well, Mr. Dent, do you have any thoughts on that? No. And ironically, 10 years later, as I'm leaving the board, the person that left the board midterm has returned to come back onto the school board. Well, there's something to be said about a correlation there. The good news is that since then, we really have assembled a top-notch administrative and teaching core here that is forward-thinking and really has advanced this district to some pretty high levels. And I'm proud to be a part of that. And I always think that the board is a smaller part of it than the board really thinks of itself most times. The administrators here are the ones that are doing the really good, hard work, and I commend them, and I'm proud to be associated with this very fine administrative core that we have here. So I feel comfortable in leaving the district in very capable hands. I think the new school board members that have been elected are certainly a fine group of people, as I've learned to know them. And this is a sad time for me to leave something that's been such a big part of my life. Being on the school board is an open-ended job. There's no limit to how much you can give to it, and I've tried to give as much as I could. So I will be thinking of all of you as I sit on the beach at Turks and Caicos in January, tempering my sadness with some refreshment that has a little umbrella in it, I think. And I will be thinking good thoughts of you and appreciating the wonderful time I've had serving this school district, and will always wish you the best. So thank you for the lovely commemorative statue. Appreciate it.
Does any board member have any comments? Okay, next up, Ms. Dawn He. So Dawn came onto the board in 2011. She was, I think that one of the things that Dawn really harnessed was taking on chair of curriculum. She, many accomplishments associated with curriculum. The board set some big objectives and initiatives. One of them was the expansion of our AP courses. Back in 2010, Spring-Ford had roughly 10 or 11 AP classes, if I remember correctly, and with, actually after we vote this evening, we may have, I think we're up to 24 is it 24, 20, 25? 25, so that's more than doubled from when Don took over curriculum, and that's a heck of an accomplishment. And the other big accomplishment that I'm thinking about is when we identified the Modernized Learning Initiative. That initiative was a 5-year program, started out as a pilot. We talked about this for many meetings over the last few years, but that started out as a pilot. It was talking about how we were going to bring computers into the classroom and integrate it with curriculum. And again, through the curriculum committee, with Don's leadership, through a lot of trials and tribulations, we were able to move that project forward to the point where, as we saw last week, we had a presentation at the 9th grade center, which was the first class that will receive computers and have them all the way through 12th grade. So, and I'm sure there's many things that I'll probably forget about, but they're the two biggest accomplishments that I can think about in curriculum, other than there was, the initiative where the curriculum budget back in 2010 was roughly $50,000, and we're probably, Mr. Fink, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our curriculum budget now is about $2 million or somewhere in there, which also, several years, about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was, we took curriculum and we eliminated the technology committee and we combined both of those committees together. And then Don was able to continue taking that forward and making sure that the plans that we had in place for the continuous technology improvements were going on and made it all part of that. And because the goal, like I said, was to merge technology and curriculum together. So again, Don, we appreciate everything that you've done over the 8 years that you've been on the board. You've been a tremendous asset to not only the students and administration, but the community at large, because every decision that you took on was community oriented as well. So again, thank you for everything that you have done.
Not at all prepared, as Ed was, so I'll just say ditto to everything that you said, Ed, other than I joined the board right after Dr. Gooden and Dr. Roach had gotten here, and yes, we saw several iterations of curriculum during that time and changes, and while I have been on curriculum for all 8 years, I was also happy to serve all 8 years at the Western Center and 7 of the 8 years on the policy committee. So yeah, there's been a lot of different things that we've been involved in as a board, and each of us independently, but as a group, the fact that we are able to come together and work for the betterment of our students is really what I'm most proud of, so thank you.
Well, I just want to say, being a member of the curriculum committee, I really appreciate the work that you did, Dawn, to make the committee run smoothly, and all the hard work you did in preparing the summaries that you gave at all these board meetings over all these years. You really did a tremendous job, and thank you for making my time on the curriculum committee a lot easier, because you did a lot of the really hard work.
Don, I would like to thank you for your service and your commitment to Spring-Ford. 8 years is a long time to be away from some missed dinners. I see your families here smiling, which is a great thing. I simply say job well done. We sit here long nights, committee meetings, long nights. You go home, you get the emails you don't want to get from parents sometimes, and in the daytime it's a thankless job, and you've done very well here. And simply put, job well done.
Unfortunately, Kelly Spletzer, who's also retiring from the board, wasn't able to make it this evening due to work responsibilities. So last but not least is Mr. Denner. Mr. Denner came onto the board in 2007 and served 12 years and is the longest serving board member right now on this board. Some may or may not know, but from time to time, Mr. Denner and I disagreed. maybe once or twice.
We also agreed a few times.
We definitely agreed a few times as well. We definitely had our opportunity or times that we agreed.
Did I miss those meetings?
All kidding aside, Mr. Denner was dedicated to Spring-Ford for 12 years, and before that, and will probably continue after that as well. He was definitely took on the role of being a steward for the taxpayer money, was very conscientious about spending, and really wanted to ensure that we looked at every expenditure very closely. Sometimes he agreed after the fact, and sometimes he still thought maybe not. That's okay. That was what made us a strong board, where everyone had their position and their opinions. Mark has chaired extracurricular. You served on, finance and policy, Western Center, property, right? So he's been definitely involved, past president. So he's contributed over that 12-year period an enormous amount of time, effort, and dedication to Spring-Ford. Like was mentioned, missed some family dinners and some family obligations, I would say, but was here like a trooper, because I think the only time you really missed a meeting was when you were traveling for work. I think 4 meetings in 12 years, which is incredible. Mark, again, was tremendous in providing a lot of insight into when you hear us talking about contract negotiation and all that. Mark does that for a living and has provided value to making sure that we include things in some of our contracts that we might not have thought about. And that's what each one of us brought to the board. We had our backgrounds and our experiences that we're able to contribute, So it's been a good, I've been on the board, I've been with 10 years with you, and like I said, it's been a good 10 years. I think being 12 years is a long time to be dedicated to a position that we've seen a lot as a district grew in that period of time, and many things that you as well should be extremely proud of. So, thank you for everything that you've done. We certainly will miss you, and I'm sure Clint will pick up where you left off. Right? So, anyway, well, thank you for everything.
Okay. It took me, I think, maybe 9.5 years to train Tom. I think it finally has sunk in. School board, 12 years is like dog years. I really have 84 years in. So, but one of the constants, the only constant really at this board is with Diane Fern, who made being on the school board so much easier. She's so excellent at her job that I can be replaced. I don't know if she can when she eventually retires, but I've lived here for almost 47 years now, and I came here as a 15-year-old, and this was a totally different place. It was farms and factories. Pretty much most people lived and worked in the school district, which is not the case anymore. Some people that they came back to life from 40 years ago wouldn't recognize Spring-Ford in any respect. The area is totally different. Some people over the years have questioned what I was thinking I was being political, but I really was not being personal or political in anything I did. I just thought it was my job to question anything I thought I needed answers on, making the right decision. I had to try to balance having a quality education with having something the taxpayers could afford. And after I leave, I'm not sure who will be happy, some members of the public to see me go, or my wife to see me be on the school board. So, but anyway, I may stop in from time to time. I may ask a question from time to time, but who knows? Thank you for all the support I got in that 12 years.
I would just like to actually thank all three, Mark, Ed, and Dawn. I've only had the pleasure of being on the board with the three of you for the last 2 years, so my interactions have been significantly less than, say, Mr. DeBello's. However, you all have brought, your own perspective and conviction and commitment, and it's been an honor to serve with each of you, and I can't thank each of you enough for guidance and support that you've given me, and certainly everything that you've brought to our district, to our students, to our community. We are better for your years served, and we appreciate it, so thank you.
Mark Dennard, my partner in crime on 2 different time frames of being on the school board. I too thank you for your 12 years of service, and sometimes you really got to think about 12 years. That is a long time to be on a school board. It's a long time to be involved in any organization, let alone school board. I'll miss you. I will debate with Tom in your absence. I appreciate everything that you've taught me, and I've learned many attributes of being a good steward of the district, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
All right, it's always sad to see good, solid, strong school board members leave, but, let's understand when we need to retire and move on. And I'm sure that we'll have new board members coming on, and we'll continue to have a strong, effective board as we continue to propel Spring-Ford forward. I am going to break protocol slightly because I know Representative Mr. Cerisi has mentioned to me that he wanted to come in. Since serving with each of you on the board for several years, he just wanted to take a few minutes and I'm not sure, I think roast each of you. But we'll see. We'll see what Mr. Cerisi has to say.
Well, thank you very much, and I too want to thank Mrs. Fern for all her work. I support a raise for you, Diane, maybe double salary. I always did, Tom was against it. Anyway, it's always nice to be here, especially behind this beautiful podium. I don't know where the idea came from. It's an interesting night to be here. Tom, really, you covered a lot of area that I probably would have covered. I served, I think the longest was I think Mark and Ed were about the same with me, about 8 years we served together. I went to Dawn, so I guess the 3 of you were really all about the same. But, to be a school board member takes a lot. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and also takes a lot of yelling and screaming sometimes from the public and doing the right thing. And I think that the presentations that we saw here tonight, and now being away from the district for 2+ years and seeing how other districts function throughout the state, Spring-Ford is a district of distinction. We used to talk about good to great for a long time, and the great has come to the district. And of course, you could always grow from the great to beyond, but where this district was to where this district is night and day. And I'm proud to say that I was a member of this board, but more so proud to say I'm a member of this community and the support for public education, and how each and every one of you who sit here and the future members who are out here will continue a tradition that will make this district stand out, not only among the state, but we're starting to see, of course, among the nation over and over again. And it's nice to be able to be in Harrisburg and have people recognize what Spring-Ford is out of the 500 school districts. So in my newest role here as state representative, I just we wrote a little thank you for your service, for your commitment to the Spring-Ford area, to public education and advancing public education. And I did have a little something to say about each member. Kelly isn't here tonight, so I'll give you this for Kelly, but I want to thank you, Dawn, for the 8 years that we did serve together, and the time, 6 years, I guess, and your commitments, like Tom said. And I know the hard work that you put in and for the family, and the countless nights that you did miss softball games, that you did miss dinners, that you did miss Chris, that you were with all of us debating or working to make this district where it went and where it is. And with you, Ed, Tom, that was a reminder of the Science in Motion, the countless hours that you lobbied for Science in Motion.
Well, I also remember the fun times we had at the Western Center trying to get some very basic things done that you and I had to fight very hard to achieve, and you really were a force to be reckoned with out there and made some good things happen.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. But you did take science to this district and looked at it and did a hard dive into it and talked to us about the issues that we had. And I remember sitting through those meetings and hearing and saying, you know, Ed, this is his career. And as you could see from those science scores, they're pretty impressive. I will say on those scores from a state perspective that I am somewhat taken aback by what we set as standards as a state of Pennsylvania. I find those standards to be extremely low and not challenging enough. Unfortunately, I don't sit on the education committee. I hope to my second time around, but I really think that there needs to be a major improvement from the state side on what we're asking our children to do and not our staffs, not in this district, but across the state, because some of those numbers are really extremely low. But Springford has advanced majorly. And Mark, you and I may have gone at each other a lot over the years. Again, I think that it was good to be able to disagree, but also to come to a resolution. And when we look at where the resolution is today, I think our disagreements made us a better district and a better way to be able to perform together. I've always said I don't hold anything personally. We may have yelled and screamed at each other some nights, but at the end of the day, when you look at this district, we got to the same place. We took a different road, but we got to the same place, and I want to thank you for your commitment to this district and for the fight and putting up the time and the energy, and for all of you combined. So I do have a little citation that I will leave with Diane and just distribute it afterwards. I did hear there was cake. Is there a good cake in the back? All right, did you bake it? All right, good. Because I know that's the only reason Tom does these ceremonies is for the cake. Of course, he always does. I do have a message from Beyond that's up in the Poconos. Mr. Pettit wishes to offer you his congratulations. I had asked them to be here tonight, but unfortunately they couldn't attend, to be here to thank each and every one of you. But I know that the district will move into good hands with the new board and the commitment and the future to continue to make us proud as a community and make me proud every time I get an opportunity to speak about this great district. So thank you all for your service, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
So originally, my plan was going to be that we were going to take a quick 10-minute break and then come back and do the agenda, the rest of the agenda. But if the board doesn't mind, because of the hour, I'm going to just see if we could get through this agenda pretty quick here, and then we could enjoy a nice cupcake. We went with cupcakes this time. So let's see what we can do here. So. Do I have meeting minutes, A and B?
Second.
Motion second, any comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Personnel, A through F.
Second.
Motion second, any comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Finance, A through Q. Motion second, any comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Property, A.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comment? All in favor, say aye. Programming and curriculum, A. Motion second. Any comment?
Yeah, I had one last comment, maybe. I may think of something later. But okay. Who's lying? Yeah. Anyway, I've had reservations about the microeconomics course. Like I said last week about the equity in the economy, the government promotion. But in the spirit of moving forward, and the reservation about the cost of textbook, I'm not going to oppose this, particularly since it would sink the resolution for today. And I wanted to see Dr. Good smile one last time at a board meeting. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor, say aye. Quickly, aye. Conferences and workshops, A through F. Motion second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Other business, A through C and E and F. Motion second, any comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Board comment. Public to be heard. Okay, in closing, before we adjourn the meeting, like I said, we do have a few cupcakes in the back if you want to stay for a few minutes, and you're welcome to, and we'll be conjugating, and, you know, maybe we'll do like a wedding and smush a cupcake in somebody's face. Do I have a motion?
Stand by the cake, Tom. I'll like it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor, say aye. Aye, meeting adjourned.